Well, good morning, church. How are you doing this morning? It is so good to see you. It's great to be connecting with everybody who's watching online as well with us today. We're continuing our Uncharted series. In fact, I've extended this series by 1 week because this week as I was writing, I just felt like there was too much to try to squeeze in to this, making it the final week. I said, we're going 1 more week next week to wrap this thing up. There's this great story that is told in Genesis chapter 24. If you have your Bibles, that's where we're going to be this morning. It's the longest chapter in Genesis, and it connects to Abraham's son Isaac and him finding a wife. The longest chapter in Genesis, connecting to this story of legacy and marriage. And I just think it's so cool how that, and how God is so present in the everyday real life moments. I thought, I don't want to rush through this story because there's just so much there. But to catch you up, we've been following Abraham through a journey of great faith, an uncharted journey, one that no one had ever been on before, quite like he was on. We started with him when he was age 75, and God put a call in his life and said, Abraham, I'm going to make you into a great nation. I'm going to have you leave the land and everything that's comfortable right now, and I'm going to take you and your wife Sarah, you who've never been able to have kids, and you are going to have a child, and from that child will come a great nation. Well, that was hard to believe at 75, but they trusted God. They stepped out and they left home and went to a new land. And then it took 25 years for that promise to be kept, but God kept his promise. And at age 100 for Abraham, age 90 for Sarah, they had their first child. Last week, we looked at a part of the story about 20 years after Isaac's birth, where God tested Abraham. He took him up on Mount Moriah, and he told him, I want you to sacrifice your son. An unfathomable request. He wasn't actually going to see this through, but he wanted to see where Abraham's faith was, and he was willing to trust God in that moment. God provided a substitute instead. And now we're about 20 years past that point. Isaac is 40 years of age, and Abraham, well, he's getting up there. He's getting up there in years. In fact, I so love the way Genesis chapter 24 opens, because it says in verse 1 that Abraham was now very old. And the Lord had blessed him in every way. Like if the Bible, which lists people, some of these guys' ages, like in numbers that we can't even hardly fathom, when the Bible calls you old, like you're old. Like when old people call you old, you're old. Now I'm learning that old is relative. It is very, very relative. There was a day and time for me when 50 years of age sounded ancient. Man, that doesn't seem like that anymore to me. That seems like, hey, no, 50 is the new 30, right? Like that's the way they go. I can feel myself getting old though. My kids' friends call me Unc, which I didn't really know how to take that, but I think it's just translation, you're old, dude. You're old. Abraham is now 140 years old. So I don't care what your reference point is, that's old. That's old. He's up there. And he's had a chance to see God do some pretty incredible things in his life. He's seen this miracle child born, but now this child is 40 years of age himself. He's not married. He's never had a child. And so Abraham is now wondering, will the promise survive the next generation? I know God said it would. I know that it has to if this was to be fulfilled, what God was to say. But man, here is another moment of faith in Abraham's life. That alone could preach a whole sermon. That for all the great moments in Abraham's life, there's still always another moment that requires faith. If you've ever thought that like there's just a 1-time or a 2-time or a 5-time, experience that you have with God, and then you're done with all the faith experiences and then you just coast, that's not the way this works. This uncharted journey of faith is one that goes on and on and on and on till your last breath. Abraham can see that this promise is unfolding, but now Sarah has died. Isaac is 40. And if this thing is going to continue, this covenant, then Isaac needs to marry somebody. And he's going to need to marry somebody who shares this same faith as he does. This covenant's going to continue. He needs to do this. So Isaac and Abraham swear an oath. And Abraham's like, Isaac, I need faith to be important in your life. And this covenant that God spoke over you, it needs to be important in your life. Abraham tells him, you've got to marry somebody from our homeland who shares the same faith as you have. And this was important because Abraham knew that who he marries will shape who he becomes. It will shape the future of this promise. Again, Genesis 24 is the longest chapter in Genesis. It's interesting that the longest chapter in the whole book is a story of marriage and relationship. Why? Well, it's not just a marriage story, it's a legacy story. And I think that's what Abraham is in, that kind of mode at this point in life. He's in legacy mode. He's thinking about what will last after I'm gone. Everybody's life leaves a mark. Everybody's life leaves something behind. And I'm not just talking possessions or even memories, but a legacy. Abraham may be old, but he's not thinking old. He's thinking wise. He's looking ahead and he's thinking, what will outlast me after I'm gone? That's legacy. That's legacy. That's what a lot of people start to think about as they get to maybe the midway point in life or some of the later years in life, where they start realizing, most of what we've been taught to live for is success. And you want to be a winner, you want to be successful, you want to achieve, you want to do. And all of that has its own place. But the older you get, the more you start to realize, more than successful, I'd rather be significant. I'd rather live a life of significance. In fact, there's a guy by the name of Bob Buford who coined the phrase halftime and coined the phrase shifting from success to significance as kind of a byline in that book. When he turned 50, he'd been very successful in the oil industry in Texas, probably been more blessed than he ever could have imagined he would be. He started to come to a realization that there was going to be a moment in time where none of it would matter. And so with the time that he had left, and he kind of considered it halftime at age 50, as he went into the locker room and looked at the next half of life, how would he live different on the other side of this? And his conclusion was he needed to live more for significance than success. I think that's what Abraham is doing. I think he's looking at, hey, this is the future that I want for my family long after I'm gone is connected here. But it's what's at stake is we got to get this guy married. We got to get this guy married if we're going to see this thing go. Some of you parents are nodding. You're feeling this right now. You're like, we got to get this kid married. We got to get this going. We got to get it all in God's time. It's all in God's time. Abraham calls his servant and he gives him a mission. And he said, I need you to go back to our homeland. I need you to find a wife for Isaac. And so they build a team. And as they get ready to depart, Abraham gives kind of like a last word, a speech to kind of get them ready for this trip that they're about to take. Verse 7. He says, the Lord, the God of heaven, who brought me out of my father's household to my native land, who spoke to me and promised me on oath, saying, to your offspring I will give this land. He will send his angel ahead of you so that you can get a wife for my son from there. As they're getting ready to take off on their journey, Abraham says with great confidence, you guys are going to be successful in this journey because God is going to go before you. I think as a parent, I can appreciate this because this whole conversation is one that as your kids get older, elevates your anxiety level. Who are they going to marry? It elevates your concern. It elevates because who they marry affects so much of their life. There's every reason for Abraham to be very, very anxious in this moment. I'm going to go send this team to go find a wife. Obviously a different culture. It's a different scenario. It's a different world than the one that we are living in right now. There's no Facebook. There's no dating apps. There's no colleges where you meet. No high schools that you connect. It's a very different world. But every anxiety still exists. But rather than recite his concerns or his fears, Abraham rehearses in that speech his confidence in God's faithfulness. He says, the God who spoke to me, the God who promised me, the God who led me previously he will see this through. That's such a good practice. The next time you find yourself in a faith moment, Henry Blackaby calls these a crisis of belief. And what he means by that is it's easy to say you believe something until you have a moment where you actually have to believe it. And in that moment where what you believe has a real life application for you to walk it out, that's what he calls a crisis of belief. It's easy when we find ourselves in a crisis of belief to start rehearsing our fears and our anxieties for why it isn't going to work out. That's what we seem to do pretty naturally. But Abraham instead rehearses not his fears or anxieties, but his confidence that he has in God. His confidence for the future is rooted in the track record of what God has already done. One of the greatest things for your anxiety and your concern when you find yourself struggling to trust God in the future is to look backwards at what he's already done. And to see his track record over time of him proving himself. I mean, you can rewind the tape all the way back 2,000 years if you need to. If you're struggling to find something that would give you confidence, because with Jesus we have an empty tomb. And we have this incredible argument from the greater to the lesser that if God could do that, which is greatly hard to do, raise somebody back from the dead, then he could definitely step into my life and figure out and work through and help what's going on in my life. That's not to minimize anything that you might be working through or struggling with, but I'm telling you, if you're still breathing, your struggles are less difficult than somebody who's dead coming back to life. And if God's already proven he can do that, how much more does he have the strength to be able to do in your life what you need? Abraham is not only pushing Isaac towards this level of faith, he's pushing this servant who's going to go on this mission to trust God. And in doing so, he's kind of helping pave the way. It's like his life of faith is paving the way for those who are following behind. We've used the term pathfinders here at Northview for the last couple years and we've used them when we're doing significant initiatives or things at the church. We've got a group of pathfinders, a group of leaders who are leading groups and leading ministries who will call in and we'll talk a little bit earlier than the rest of the group too about what God is doing and what we feel led to do. And the idea was kind of born out of World War II. There was a group called Pathfinders who would go in and parachute in the cover of night into Nazi-occupied Germany, and they would do so that they could land first and mark the trail for everybody who was coming in later. And because the Pathfinders had gone in ahead of time, those who would land later would have a much simpler, much easier navigatable path for their journey. Your faith today sets up somebody else's faith and their confidence tomorrow. Abraham and this servant who was living in the household had watched Abraham's faith over time. They knew the stories of the altars being built and the worship. They were there for Mount Moriah. They had seen their father trust God, and now they're living in the results of that faith. Maybe said another way to kind of apply to you today is to think about it through this lens. It's that your journey becomes somebody else's map. Like we've been talking a lot about how your faith journey is one that's unique to you, and so therefore it's uncharted. But inevitably, the steps that you take help chart a path for the people that come after you. And then your uncharted journey becomes a very charted journey for the next person because they can see what you've done. Isaac is walking in faith-worn tracks. He's doing things that his dad has already done. As we said, Genesis 24 is one of the longest chapters in Genesis, and most of it is the servant retelling the story of Abraham to some of the people back in the homeland. Now think about how significant it is that he could do that. And the reason he could do that is because he had heard Abraham tell his own faith story so many times that he knew it, and he could recite it. And he could tell that story to somebody else. He had heard the promise. He had seen the provision. He had witnessed the faithfulness. So the faith was not just preached in Abraham's household. It was practiced. And so this servant leaves and he goes to this area called Nahor, and he doesn't know who the woman is. He doesn't know what she looks like. He doesn't know who he's going to find. He's just trusting that God will show him. And so he does something that he's seen Abraham do. Again, because Abraham's uncharted journey has paved the way for him, and he's seen Abraham pray in times of crisis or in times of need. So he prays, and he prays in Genesis 24:12, Lord, God of my master Abraham, make me successful today. First of all, he starts with confidence in God. Make me successful today. And then he goes on to pray one of the most specific prayers in the Bible. I mean, it's almost like on par with Gideon, who prayed a prayer over a fleece, and God, have all the morning dew land on this fleece, and then the next day, have none of the morning dew land on this fleece. Very specific, something he could absolutely know if this happened, it was only because God was involved. And he said, I pray, God, that a woman offers me water, and not only that when I come towards this area that she would offer me water, but she would also offer me water and also water my camels. Well, I know that we don't have a ton of perspective on a camel around here. But a thirsty camel could drink 25 gallons of water at a time. If you had 10 camels, that's 250 gallons of water. That's a lot of work that this woman would do. So there was a reason why he would say not just that she would offer me water, but that she would offer to also water my camels. She's not just putting a little bowl out like you would for a dog here, guys. I mean, this is work. This is roll up your sleeves, not a short amount of time, but really putting in some work. Hundreds of gallons drawn by hand from a well. Why? This would reveal a lot. One, it would be an outlandish request or an above and beyond type of offer. Two, it would reveal things about her heart. It would reveal her servanthood. It would reveal her character. It would reveal her initiative. It would reveal her grit, right? Her grit. I'm married to a farm girl. She's got some grit to her. My dad asked me one time, we were unloading something heavy, piece of furniture. I don't even remember what it was. Oh, the boys help you with that? And I was like, Jamie did. She ain't gonna let the boys do what she can do better than they can do it. She'll jump right in there. She's got some grit. Hey, he wanted to see the character of this person. And before he finishes praying the prayer, Rebecca arrives. The servant watches in silence then as she fulfills every detail of his prayer. First, she asks him if he would like a drink. And then after she offers him a drink, she says, I would love to take care of all of your camels. This prayer of faith had been passed from Abraham to his servant, and now his servant is using that same faith in his life. Abraham's journey had made a map for somebody else to follow. So that when they were in their moment, they knew what to do. He knew he should pray in this moment, and that God would hear that prayer, and he would answer that prayer. It's almost like, I think of like a family recipe. And maybe you have a family recipe or two in your family that have been passed down. We have this little box in the cabinet in our kitchen that's full of recipes that we've gotten over the years. And one of those, probably one of the most treasured, is grandma's chocolate chip cookies. And that card has been in there for 20 some years, and that card has been pulled out and put back in and pulled out and put back in. And we consult it religiously every time that we make those cookies, because you just don't mess with perfection, right? That card is starting to look a little worn. I mean, it's got some nostalgia to it because it's handwritten in my mom's handwriting. So that's cool. But it's got like probably butter or something got on it. It's got some spots on it. Like, listen, and when you see a recipe card that has butter spots on it, you hold on to that one, right? Because that means this is one we're using. This is not one that just sits in there, you know, like the meatball recipe. This is one that we're using. And you hold on to that. So you use it and you follow it to a T. And the purpose of her doing that was that you would take it out of the box and not just look at it and not just frame it and not just feel warm and fuzzy because it's her handwriting, but that you would take it and make it. And make it. In fact, I just heard a couple days ago that my daughter made grandma's chocolate chip cookies for the baseball team up at her college. And she said within minutes of them getting on the bus, they were devoured and gone. And I said, that's exactly what grandma would have wanted those cookies to be doing, is feeding hungry boys playing baseball. That's the kind of stuff that grandma lived for. That's the kind of stuff that she loved. And so if you're using it, that is perfect. That is perfect to put it into practice. But that recipe, guys, only survives if it's used. If somebody actually makes it. If it just stays written on a card, over time, it fades. And I think faith is the same way. Faith is meant to be lived in the kitchens of life, not just framed and put up on the walls. Faith, think about in your own life. Is my faith a framed faith that's up on a wall? Like I got to state it to somebody that comes in to try to eliminate any doubt. So if I hang enough crosses or I have enough like Bible verse mugs or I haven't, do I have to kind of put all of this up so that I can make it known that this is who I am? Or do I have a faith that's lived out in the kitchens of life? And it's being passed on. It's being devoured. It's being seen. It's being experienced. That's what was happening for Abraham and his household. And his servant believed because he saw Abraham believe. And Isaac believed because he saw Abraham believes. And faith multiplies when it's modeled. And so the servant meets Rebekah. He finds complete fulfillment in this prayer. And so he then unpacks for her, here's why I'm here. I'm here because Abraham sent me here. And he's here because he has a son, Isaac. And he has a promise that he's looking to fulfill. And you are connected to this family. And you are a part of this story, whether you realize it or not. God has something here for you. And so then they go back home to talk to her dad, and they tell the whole story again. And here's what happened, and I prayed this prayer, and camels and drinks and everything. And this is exactly how God, and so dad finally says, I see it. This is the hand of God. Rebekah, are you in? And she says, I will go. And he says, well, let's get you ready to go. And so they do that. And then they travel back home. And now she's living her uncharted journey. Now this is her moment of faith. This is her moment to trust God and to walk into this new thing that God has. So she willingly leaves and sets off on her own journey. And then in verse 67, it says that Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah. So she became his wife, and he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. And we turn the page and we start to see that these guys start to establish life together. But life is not always easy. And even some of these giants of the faith and some of the family connected to giants of the faith still have moments of difficulty and struggle. And this family was no different. No sooner do they get married, we start to hear reports of a struggle in their marriage. You know what it was? Infertility. Infertility. And so here's this great promise that God has spoken over one particular family, that through you, we're going to have a multitude, so many descendants that it's greater than the stars in the sky, is what God said. And so far, we have one elderly infertile couple that was able to finally have one child. And now the next generation, here we are again. And we're struggling. We're struggling. And this isn't coming together, and this isn't working. So what does Isaac do? Isaac does exactly what he saw his parents do, who went through the exact same struggle. He turned to what they turned to, prayer. Prayer. Look at verse 21 of chapter 25. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. And the Lord answered his prayer, and his wife, Rebekah, became pregnant with twins. Twins. He was praying hard, apparently. And then so their two kids, Isaac and Rebekah, have two children, Jacob and Esau. Jacob's name would later be changed to Israel. And Israel would have 12 sons. And from those 12 sons, one of them would be named Judah. And from the line of Judah would come Israel's greatest king, David. And in David's lifetime, God would promise something to him that would connect also to Abraham's original promise to bless all the nations of the earth. He says, not only will that continue to happen through you, David, but your kingdom will reign forever through your kingdom. We know that Judah not only connects to David, but it also connects to Jesus. Also connects to Jesus. What I'm saying is that you're starting to see in real time through the book of Genesis, through Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to Esau to all the boys that follow through Jacob's family. You're starting to see this thing gaining momentum, this promise that God spoke. And it's connected generationally through steps of faith. In fact, said this way, I would say it, steps of faith create generational momentum. Where what was maybe hard for the first generation is a little bit easier for the second, and a little bit easier for the third, and a little bit easier for the next one. Abraham guided Isaac towards a life of faith. And what was unknown and scary and difficult and without mile markers for Abraham was a little more navigatable for Isaac. Not only that, he was able to come to some conclusions and step down some roads a little faster than his dad was able to step down them because of the legacy factor. In the same way, your life is writing a spiritual biography. It's writing one. People are reading it. The question is, what legacy are you leaving? Is it one of faith? You know, and I know as parents and with our kids, there's always a lot that we're trying to help them with and leave to them and instill in them. And man, I struggle all the time with just feeling like I'm a complete failure in this category, just all the time. But the truth is the kids are going to forget the lectures. They're going to forget the witty pieces of wisdom that you say. They're probably going to most remember the patterns. And they're going to remember some things and some seasons of life where they had an up-close view of your faith in your moments or crises of belief. And they're going to see, hey, did mom and dad trust God in that moment of hardship? Did they surrender? Did they pray when things were tight? Did mom trust God when things were uncertain? Did dad pray when it was difficult? Did they trust God when it was inconvenient to do so? The encouragement, I guess, for me is that uncharted faith always reaches farther than you could imagine. I don't think Abraham could have ever imagined that we'd still be talking about him today. But the truth is, this story goes from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to Jesus to you. Because Galatians chapter 3 verse 29 says that if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and you are heirs according to the promise. This was never meant to be singularly like a one nation, one people group type promise. This was meant to be for all people at all times. And this was never understood fully until Jesus. But this legacy that Abraham was trying to leave in his family is a legacy that includes you. And a legacy that you have an opportunity to leave as well. You are walking in the promises that Abraham believed for. You are walking in part of the multiplication that he never saw, could never see, or fully understand. I think if he were here today, he would probably just have a pretty straightforward, simple response that he would call us to. Number one would be, receive the promise that was spoken first to me, but that also applies to you. That through faith, this God that created the whole world and sent his only son, Jesus, has a plan to bless you in your life. And his blessing will never be more fully understood than when you surrender to his son, understanding that he died in your place for your sins as a gift to you so that you could experience eternal life. Not separated from him forever because of what you've done wrong, but united with him forever because of what he did right. So receive that promise. It's offered to you. There's an opportunity to step into that right here today, maybe even for the first time. If you'd like to, you can do that by responding personally. If you're here in this room, I'll stand over at the side exit to your left as we sing this next song and help you take that step. If you've taken that step, can I just say today and reiterate that your life has a legacy connected to it? Every life does. And may you make it a goal as it relates to faith to leave big tracks so that people behind you can see the journey a little more clearly, so that people behind you can understand God's goodness because of your life, not your perfection, not your awesomeness, not your wisdom, but God's seen in your life. And as you walk, know that you're not only walking your path, but you're making it clearer for somebody else behind you. And God may take them further or somewhere a little different than he took you, but your journey is spilling over and affecting others. So leave big tracks with the time that God gives you here on this earth so that his legacy can reflect in your legacy. Will you stand with me?